All right. Hello, Captain Arthur. Major Lee Austin. Yeah, I'll get that mixed up. Hello, everybody. Appreciate everybody being here. We're going to give it just a couple minutes while I'm waiting on others to join us. And I know my voice is going out again. Don't know why, don't know how, but it is. So just bear with me. I'll try to talk loud enough. We're going to be talking about the Third Amendment tonight. Anybody that wants to talk and discuss this Third Amendment of the Constitution is welcome to come up on panel. Just be mindful, if you do come up on panel, you will be on Roku. Just keep that in mind. You will be on Roku. The people in the chat will not be on Roku. The rules are the same, and they'll be the same while we have these types of panels. And if you don't know what those are, look in the description. I'm not going to read them out every night that I do this. I don't have a video queued up because I didn't want to have to cut it out. So anytime you're ready there, Major Lee Awesome, you can kick it off if you're ready.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I am. And first, let me say, Jeff, that my oldest is watching tonight to get some information on the Third Amendment. So if anybody's up on panel, I just ask that they refrain from any questions. So for the young one's ears. But to get started talking about the Third Amendment, we there's a lot of misconceptions, of course. One is that go ahead.
No, I didn't say nothing.
Okay. One of the misconceptions is that it came about from the British, quartering soldiers in people's personal homes, and that actually wasn't the case. The Third Amendment can be traced directly to the British Quartering Acts of 1765 and 1774. And basically, what had happened was after the French and Indian Wars and the Pontiac War, or I guess you could say attacks, the British Parliament thought that they should keep a large standing army over here in the colonies to help defend the frontier. And the colonists saw it as, a trespass upon their rights, having a large number of armed troops held among them. And they thought it might be a way that the king could use the troops to, repress their rights, as they saw, a couple years down the road with the Intolerable Acts and the Stamp Act and all that other stuff, the taxation on tea and that stuff. But basically, the Quartering Act of 1765 laid out the fact that, hang on one second. Okay, sorry, guys. So basically, it laid out the fact that the British troops were not allowed to quarter in people's personal homes. Where they were allowed to quarter, and what the act was about was having the colonies pay for and house the British soldiers that were there. So basically, in the Quartering Act of 1765, it required the colonies to build barracks, to feed the troops, or to provide the troops with different stuff, salt, beer, cider with some of the items, bedding, that kind of stuff was required by the colonies to supply to the British troops. So that's where the Third Amendment came from, is because the colonists were upset, obviously, about having to pay for a large amount of troops in what was considered to be peacetime, and a lot of the colonists thought they could, protect themselves against any native attacks, and they didn't really see the need to have the standing army there. And it was, quite a debate back then about all that. So when they wrote the Constitution, they wanted to put it in there, not because again that they were quartering in people's personal houses, but that they were directing where the troops could be, boarded, and that's where the Quartering Act of 1774 comes in. It was a modification on the Act of 1765, and basically in the Quartering Act of 1765, it allowed the colonies, their legislature, to decide where the British troops were quartered. So in places like Massachusetts, they would quarter the troops, far outside of Boston. They try to keep them as far away from the town center as possible, which the British didn't like. They like to be, closer to the town center, closer to the town people. So the Quartering Act of 1774 removed the power from the colonial legislature to decide where to quarter the British troops, and gave it to a British like governor to, direct where the British troops were going to be quartered at. So it really had nothing to do with people's private property and the fact that it wasn't in their home, but it was allowable for the British soldiers to be quartered in like inns or ale houses or barns, unoccupied homes. So if there was a home that was unoccupied, then the British could quarantine or quarter there. Excuse me. So it was a little bit different than most people think. It's an amendment that I don't think it's been legislated, or not legislated, but litigated in front of the Supreme Court ever. Because again, after the Constitution was written, we don't have any instances of that taking place.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say we got some more people in here. Does anybody have anything to add to that, or any questions?
I have a question about the Tea Act of 1773.
The what?
The Tea Act of 1773.
Okay.
If you could elaborate on that. Thank you.
Well, I'm not too familiar on the Tea Act of 1773, be it the fact that maybe tea was being taxed from it. I've never read the full thing on it. I'm looking it over here. I mean, a lot of acts were passed during this time that really were rubbing the colonists the wrong way. The Intolerable Acts, the Quartering Acts. Okay, it says here the objective was to reduce the massive amount of tea held by the financially troubled British East India Company. So it's probably talking about the monopoly that the Parliament gave to the East India Company in America for its tea, and it kind of cut out the Dutch tea that was being smuggled in. So basically, it was causing financial strife there with the colonists. So it's causing financial strife there with the colonists, which was again just another reason why the colonies were upset with Britain and the king and Parliament. It says here that at the time of the Tea Act, 86% of all the tea in America at the time was smuggled Dutch tea. So, I mean, basically they just cut out the colony's ability to bring in Dutch tea. You know, they were forced to use the East India Company tea, and obviously the East India Company tea was taxed at a higher level, and it cut into the financial strife. You know, the financials of the colonists, the merchants there. So you know, a lot of conditions that fostered the American Revolution were due to merchants. You know, the acts, the commerce acts that they put on them for import and export, and the customs tax, and you know, the Intolerable acts, which shut down the port of Boston. Um, that's how, I guess you could say, punishment was handed out back then, was financially. You know, they'd pass an act to tax you, or pass an act to, you know, close your port, or, you know, raise your customs, or, you know, whatever have you. So the Tea Act was just another example of the British Parliament exerting authority over the colonies, and you know, trying to get some money out of the whole deal. Can everybody
Thank
still
you.
hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Yep, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is there
I
some
can
more
play.
questions?
Let me do this little video right quick. I think that'll
Oh,
help a little bit here.
Because honestly, there's not much on the Third Amendment. There's actually never been a Supreme Court case regarding the Third Amendment, so it's almost irrelevant in today's age. But I'm still going to cover it because it is important to know. So this is exactly how it's worded in the Bill of Rights. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. So what does this mean? Well, this basically just means that soldiers are not allowed to live inside of someone's house without the person saying that it's okay. Now, this was actually, you might think, what, like, why is this an amendment? But it was actually a huge deal back in at the time, because before America became a sovereign nation, British troops would be stationed in Americans' houses, whether they liked it or not. And so when the Founding Fathers created this amendment, it really meant a lot to them, because it was all about freedoms, and they don't want soldiers coming into the house, and they wanted their privacy too. So that's basically it, though. And actually, also after the Boston Tea Party, which is depicted here in this picture, this actually just brought on more British troops into Americans' houses, because the British didn't trust Americans, and so British troops would be stationed inside of Americans' houses in Boston, Massachusetts at the time, actually. And so it's definitely an amendment that's not very well known, but hopefully you understand it now.
All right. That kind of, you know, added to the Tea Party, you know, the question. So I thought that was relevant. There you go.
yeah. The problem with that is that again, it's passing a myth along that these people were quartered in Americans' homes. I mean, to think about it, if you didn't trust somebody, you certainly wouldn't want to sleep in their home where they can come up and cut your throat in the middle of the night. So this was definitely false. And again, as a matter of fact, from reading of the acts themselves, you will find that it's actually prohibited to stay in someone's home that's there. You know what I mean? So it's the only exception to that would be the 1774 Act, which states other buildings. So, you know, if maybe the governor took that other buildings to mean American homes, possibly, but I would see that on like a very, very rare occasion, if at all. And again, it would be, to me, ludicrous to spend the night in somebody's home that doesn't like me. You know?
I'm thinking it was like they wouldn't spend a night in their home. They would spend a night in their home, yes, but the people that owned the home wouldn't be there, right? I mean, they would actually literally take over the home. That's what I got out of it. Maybe I'm
Well,
wrong.
right, but like the Act states, they're allowed to be in unoccupied homes. Now, if that means that they chase some people out before then, I mean, that could be very well possible. I mean, and then we'd have to get down to firsthand accounts of people that were actually involved in said activities. You know what I mean? We're looking at it from
I got
a bird's eye general view,
you. I
which
got
to
you.
me, again, would seem, because again, even though these guys were fighting, and at the time they weren't fighting us, they were there specifically to protect the frontier lands from native attacks. Um, so I don't think they'd want to, force us out of our homes at that particular time. Maybe during the revolution, some of that stuff took place, and I imagine it would. Um, but I don't think in peacetime that anything like that would have occurred. But again, we could always be wrong. But I think it's a bigger myth to perpetrate that these people were staying in people's homes when the acts pretty much prohibited that behavior, and again for good reason.
Yes. I got somebody trying to enter. It's not letting me post a StreamYard link right now. There it goes. I'm not sure if you're trying to get on the panel. I'm not sure why it's not letting you. Just keep trying. James, Medicine Audits, you got something you want to add to it?
Well, I think, I was going to say the only time I ever see this really it's not even in real life. It's just in the movies where you see a lot of reenacted war movies where they'll take over someone's home and kind of hold them somewhat hostage. And that's the only time I ever see it. But in history, I don't know of really any other types except for how they reenact it in movies now, how that would, happen, taking over someone's home and stationing up there. That's it.
I agree. Yeah, you see it in a lot of older variations of the Civil War. The Patriot, I think, was one of them. Can't remember exactly the name of it.
The Patriot.
Yeah.
But let me read you something here. This is the Quartering Act of 1765 added that if no accommodation was available in barracks and public houses, which were places where the public could crash for the night, British troops could also be housed in a variety of additional locations such as inns, ale houses, private homes of those selling wine or alcohol, which would be a bar or an ale house, pretty much, livery stables, uninhabited homes, and outbuildings such as barns. So, I mean, the acts were pretty clear on where they were able to be housed, and again, private personal homes was not on the list. So again, if they did do that, it would be something that would be very irregular. But again, it's not to say that didn't happen at all. It's just it would be against the law, their own law, and again, I think it would be a very unwise decision.
Yeah, and I was going to say a lot of, if you viewers are not, I mean, obviously know, when all this was written, we didn't have cars, we didn't have tanks, we didn't have all that stuff. So they'd be walking through somewhere and need to find a place to crash. So it very well happened frequently back then, or even happened overseas.
Right, in times of war and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Like walking down the street and say, "Hey guys, we need to find a spot. Look at this. There's a lady in her house over here. Let's go over there and see if we can get with her, or let's take over that house."
Right.
Right on. But it's pretty. You got something to say, Hank?
Final question to Major Lee.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What is your take on the Stamp Act with the first direct internal tax?
Well, again, I think that a lot of that was just brought up in order to exert authority over them. I mean, I know it also had to do with, Britain's war debt with the French over the French and Indian War, and the growing cost of, keeping the colonies secure from the natives. So it's also a way that, back in the day, there wasn't a lot of legal books here in the colonies. I think when like in the early 1700s, I think they said there was a total of like 100 legal books here in the colonies, and it was hard for them to get such stuff. And the Stamp Act was impartially a duty on legal and commercial documents. And I believe the reason for that is, like most governments, they wanted to keep the majority of the population in the dark about, what was going on in Parliament, what was going on with laws and such like that. And the way to do that, especially back then when people didn't have a lot of money anyway, would be to put a duty and a tax on, stuff like newspapers, legal documents, commercial documents, that sort of thing, that kind of restricts the flow of them.
Right on.
Lost you there, Rogue.
Road
If I
kind
may.
of disappeared. Go ahead, Tent.
Yeah, so it's precisely like Rogue was explaining. All of these amendments were put there to prevent a tyrannical government from oppressing its people. That's why it's, so important to encompass all of the information. That's why I'm glad you guys brought up the act from the British that allowed them to actually take up residence in your home. That's what these were designed for, right? We've already been over the Second Amendment, but you can't just look at one, because what the lawmakers have done is they'll grasp a hold of the ending of the Third Amendment and say, well, the law says that we can take your property so long as you're compensated. They'll grab a hold of that and run with it and say, the law says that we can do this if we compensate you. But when it comes to the Second Amendment, when it says shall not be infringed, well, apparently it can be infringed. So it's very important that you take the entire situation into context, especially with the previous amendment, because it was not put there so that you could keep a gun in your house to protect just yourself or just for hunting. That's what the Third Amendment proves. It was there specifically for protection from the government or another government, in which case it was another government, right? America formed their own government because of the tyranny of the British. So for anybody to ever think that the amendment that came before the Third Amendment that specifically stated it was there to protect you from militaries, it's very disingenuous.
Right on. Anybody else got anything?
Yeah, the only thing I would say on that is, like, you got all these basic documents, like what Tenth was saying. It's all of them are very, very short until you start getting into 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. And one of the sad things about it is how clear and concise those are. And talking about a tyrannical government, I think we have a tyrannical government now because they make rules and laws on everything, with laws in states, laws in federal and city ordinances, county ordinances. And that's my take on it. They do anything you can right now to prohibit you from doing as much as you can when there's a basic constitution that says you should be able to live free, be able to have your firearms, have your house not taken from you, and right not to be searched, and the right to be able to remain silent. And when you do those and exercise those, you become a nuisance to the government. Sad, just like Soliaker, like any one of us that go out there and audit. It's crazy.
It seemed like it was a whole lot simpler back then than it is now, for sure, because you got so much, like you said, James.
Everything, yeah.
Everything. There's always stipulations, and there's always, man, and the amendments were wrote for everybody to understand. Now you can't understand, and nobody can remember all the laws or ordinance, like you said. There's no way. It's just too damn many of them. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And that's how we find that some of these law enforcement officers, sheriffs and whatnot, don't know them all because they can't. There's just too damn many of them.
And a real funny story, I'll just, touching on it, we're taking away from the Constitution here, but that's what started my auditing. Is I had a neighbor that was in aggravation. He thought he was swifter than I was. I knew more about the laws than he was. He tried to get me on something, and you know what I got him on? His trash cans being 5 feet from the property. And I kept doing it. And he's like, I'm not moving my trash cans. And I kept calling in and calling. They finally fined him $500 for his trash cans being next to his property line. But he was agitating me. But that's crazy. That's what it is. It's such a tyrannical government now.
Yeah.
With oppression.
No doubt.
And what's the most amazing part about the situation is, like you're saying, they've made so many rules that essentially everybody is a criminal. So anybody who starts any type of trouble, they can just make up a reason why they're going to put you into prison, right? But when it comes to the government or any government official, they can mostly only get tried on ethics violations, right? They can never actually see jail time. Like, we're never going to see any of the people that submitted false reports to the FISA courts. We're never going to see them held responsible. We're never going to see any of the public officials held responsible, because they wrote the laws specifically so that they're absolved of any responsibility.
I've got one for you. Here's a funny one. That you're exactly that. Just recently, a city released Social Security numbers of victims, right? On a report they gave to me. They weren't supposed to do it. The city attorney had me fill out an affidavit to give back to them and say that I, destroyed all the copies of it. There is absolutely no criminal offense for them doing that, or any information, personal information, right? Now, if in Florida specifically, if a librarian releases the contents of your book checkout, like if they say what you've checked out at the library, it is a criminal offense on that librarian to do so. Think about that. That tells you who wrote the laws.
Right. Let's not get off track here too much. Majorly awesome. Have you got anything else, or can we close this out?
Yeah, we
I have
can
a
pretty much
final
close it out. The
question
Third Amendment
for-
is, pretty cut and dry. Again, it hasn't been litigated before the court because there's not a lot of that going on these days. So, but again, like 10th Man said, we had to touch on it. In order to understand where we are today, we have to know where we came from and the situation surrounding such.
Right on. I'm with you there. All right. Well, we'll cut this to end. That way, it won't be too long. Thank everybody for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Hank, James Madison, Majorly Awesome, 10th Man. I appreciate all you guys. Thanks everybody in the chat. Think I'm gonna shut it down. That way I don't have to edit too much. And I'll start another one up right after I go down there. So y'all be on the lookout.
All right. See you then.
Right on. See you guys.
See you, Jeff.
Right on. All right, guys. Y'all have a good one. I'm gonna come back live. We can talk some more about this. We can touch on 1, 2, 3 if you'd like to. It's totally up to you guys, but I'm gonna shut this one down now. So have a good one, and I'll be right back.